It was supposed to be just another show in Las Vegas, another night of glittering lights, deafening applause, and a legend forcing himself to shine through exhaustion. But on that particular night, Elvis Presley walked into his dressing room carrying a weight he could no longer hide. His hands were trembling. His breath was shallow. And for the first time, the king of rock felt completely powerless against the world he once conquered. Backstage, whispers spread like wildfire. His voice was cracking, his pills were missing, the colonel was furious, and Elvis seemed moments away from confessing something he had been holding inside for far too long. What happened that night would become one of the most emotionally devastating turning points of his life. Before we begin this cinematic and deeply personal journey into the heart and mind of Elvis Presley, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another documentary-style story like this. Because today, we're going far beyond the stage lights, into a truth Elvis never wanted anyone to see.
The dressing room felt colder that night. Elvis had known exhaustion before. He had known heartbreak, pressure, manipulation, loneliness, but this was different. He stared at his reflection, eyes swollen, cheeks pale, lips pressed into a trembling line. The black jumpsuit shimmered under the fluorescent lights, mocking him with the glamour he no longer felt capable of embodying. He ran a hand through his damp hair, trying to steady his breathing. Just another show, he whispered to himself. But it wasn't. For weeks he had battled insomnia, pain, and medication that blurred the world around him. The colonel pushed harder, demanding more shows, more money, more obedience, while Elvis's body begged for mercy. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "EP? They're ready for you," Charlie Hodge said gently. Elvis nodded but didn't move. He could hear the crowd roaring. Thousands of fans. Thousands of expectations. Thousands of versions of who he should be. But who was he now? His chest tightened. His heart pounded dangerously fast. And then a tear slipped down his cheek. He wasn't crying from sadness. He was crying from fear. A fear he had never admitted, not even to himself. The fear that tonight he might not make it. Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing someone Elvis never expected to see moments before the show. It was the colonel. Tom Parker barged through the dressing room door with the authority of a man who believed he owned everything and everyone in the building, including the man sitting slumped in front of the mirror. His entrance shattered the fragile silence Elvis had been clinging to. Parker's wide grin was painted on, but his eyes burned with irritation from the moment they locked onto Elvis's still figure. "There you are, my boy," he boomed, clapping his hands sharply as if commanding a dog. "The crowd's restless. Time to get that show on the road. No delays tonight." Elvis didn't stand, didn't turn, didn't pretend. He stayed slouched, staring at his reflection, at the pale skin, the hollowed cheeks, the faint tremble in his jaw. He felt like a ghost wearing his own face. The colonel's smile died instantly. "What's wrong with you now?" he snapped. Elvis lifted his gaze slowly, exhausted. "I'm tired, Colonel. Everyone's tired. This is show business, not a vacation resort." "No," Elvis's voice cracked. "Not this kind of tired. I don't feel right. Something's wrong with me." Parker scoffed loudly, turning away as if Elvis were inconveniencing him with a minor complaint. "You're fine. Take your pills. You'll get through it." Elvis flinched. He hated how casually Parker treated the medication. The same medication that numbed him, controlled him, hollowed him out piece by piece. The jumpsuit clung tightly to him, suffocating rather than empowering. Parker stepped closer, his heavy steps echoing like a warning. "You've done hundreds of shows feeling worse than this," he said sharply. "The casino expects you on stage. You know that. I know that." Everyone knows that. Elvis looked up at him, really looking for the first time in years. He saw nothing warm, nothing caring, just business. Numbers, contracts, money. Always money. A pressure rose inside him, bubbling under his ribs like a boil ready to burst. I can't do this forever, Elvis whispered. His hands tightened against his thighs. I'm losing myself. The colonel leaned in, voice low and venomous. You're losing sight of what matters. Without me, without these shows, you have nothing. Those words sliced through Elvis's already fragile heart. Something inside him snapped. No, Colonel, he said, voice trembling but firm. Without you, maybe I would have had a chance to live. Parker froze. Charlie Hodge, standing quietly near the wall, widened his eyes. He had never heard Elvis speak like that, not in all the years he'd known him. The colonel's expression shifted slowly from disbelief to fury. His cheeks darkened. His jaw tensed. You listen to me, he growled. You're paid to perform. Paid to show up. Paid to sing and smile. That's your job. That's why people come. Not to hear you complain. Elvis felt the room closing in, the air thinning. Breathing became harder. He stood up slowly, legs shaky, gripping the table to keep from collapsing. Their faces were inches apart now. For once, Elvis whispered, I want someone to care about me. Not the show. Not the contract. Me. The colonel blinked, only once, but behind that blink was pure contempt. You don't get to talk to me like that, Parker snapped. Not after everything I've done for you. Elvis clenched his fists. Everything he'd done? Or everything he'd taken? The lights above buzzed faintly. The crowd outside roared louder, their applause vibrating through the dressing room walls. The weight of expectation pressed down on Elvis's skull until it throbbed. Charlie stepped forward gently. Colonel, maybe Elvis needs a minute. Parker shot him a death glare. Elvis doesn't need a minute, he barked. He needs discipline. He needs to do his job. Elvis's head dropped. His breath grew shallow. The distant cheering twisted into something darker, something suffocating. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his chest. Elvis's hand flew to his heart, his face contorting in panic. Charlie rushed forward. EP? Hey, Elvis. Talk to me. Elvis staggered back, gripping the edge of the table. The colonel stepped away, annoyed more than concerned. Oh, for God's sake, Parker muttered. Not this again. This isn't again, Colonel, Charlie snapped. He's in trouble. Elvis's vision blurred. The room swayed violently. He couldn't breathe. In that dizzying moment, one horrifying realization gripped him. If he went on stage tonight, he might not come back off. The pain deepened, and Elvis's legs began to buckle. And the world tilted dangerously as everything slipped away into a haze of panic and darkness. Elvis's legs buckled before he even understood what was happening. One moment he was gripping the edge of the dressing table, the next he was falling, slow at first, then suddenly too fast. The world tilted, blurred, twisted. His chest tightened like a fist was squeezing the life out of him from the inside. Charlie lunged forward just in time, catching him under the arms before he hit the floor. Elvis! Elvis, stay with me, look at me. But Elvis couldn't look at anything. His vision fractured into white flashes and dark gaps, like a film reel tearing apart. The pounding in his chest was so violent he thought his heart might explode. Sweat drenched his forehead, his back, his trembling hands. The colonel stood frozen for a moment, jaw clenched, arms crossed, not in concern, but in irritation. "Oh, for Christ's sake," he muttered. "We don't have time for this. Get him up." Charlie whipped his head toward him, fury burning in his eyes. "Are you insane? He's not okay." "He's never okay," Parker shot back. "He performs anyway. That's the job." But Elvis couldn't hear them clearly. Their voices sounded muffled, stretched, distorted. The cheering crowd outside became a sickening hum vibrating through the floorboards, pulsing in his skull. His breathing went shallow. Too shallow. Like he was drowning on dry land. Charlie shook him gently. "Elvis, can you hear me?" "Squeeze my hand." "Come on." Elvis tried. He truly tried. But his fingers barely twitched. For the first time that night, fear swallowed him whole. Not fear of performing, not fear of disappointing fans, not fear of the Colonel's wrath. This was the fear of dying. He could feel his heart stuttering, skipping beats, racing uncontrollably. Each inhale was a knife. Each exhale was a struggle. Charlie shouted toward the hallway. "Someone get the paramedics. Now." Footsteps thundered outside. Voices scattered. The door flew open and 2 medics rushed in carrying equipment. "What happened?" one asked. "He collapsed," Charlie said. "Chest pain, breathing issues, he's not okay." The medic knelt beside Elvis, assessing his pulse, his eyes, his breathing. "Elvis, can you hear me? Blink if you can." Elvis blinked. Slowly. Barely. His whole body trembled. His skin was pale, ashen almost, except for the deep shadows under his eyes. The Colonel stepped closer, fake smiling at the medics like this was just another inconvenience. "Gentlemen, do what you must, but we can't delay long." The audience. The medic shot him a look of pure disbelief. "He's not going anywhere. His vitals are unstable." "What does that mean?" Charlie asked, voice cracking. "It means," the medic said carefully, "he's in no condition to perform. Not tonight." The Colonel's face hardened. "That show cannot be cancelled." Elvis, half-conscious, heard that, and something inside him, some small, dying spark, flared with anger. He opened his mouth, struggling to speak. "Why? Yes," he whispered. Every syllable trembled out like broken glass. "Cancel it." Charlie froze. The medics exchanged glances. Even the Colonel stepped back, eyes narrowing. Elvis had never said those words. Not once in decades of performing. The medic nodded firmly. "Then it's cancelled. We need to get him monitored immediately." "No show gets cancelled," the Colonel spat. But Elvis, shaking, sweating, breathing like a wounded animal, lifted a trembling hand. He said, "Cancel." Parker's face twisted into something ugly and dangerous. A rage he had spent years hiding behind smiles. "You have no idea what you're doing," he hissed. But Elvis no longer cared. He couldn't. The medics gently helped him sit upright. One placed a cold cloth on his forehead. Another checked his pulse again, frowning. Charlie stayed by his side, gripping his arm. "You scared the hell out of me." Elvis tried to breathe deeper, but each inhale rattled. His voice came out raw, barely a whisper. "Charlie, I'm dying." Charlie swallowed hard. "You're not dying, Elvis. You're overwhelmed. You're stressed. You're overworked. But you're here. I've got you." Elvis closed his eyes, tears gathering at the corners. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered. "It's killing me." One of the medics nodded softly. "He's right. If he pushes himself tonight, he could collapse again, or worse." Charlie glared at Parker as if daring him to argue. But the colonel didn't argue. He simply stared at Elvis with a cold, calculating expression, as if running numbers in his head, weighing profit against the fragility of the man before him. And in that moment, Elvis realized something devastating. The colonel wasn't worried. Not about his health. Not about his fear. Not about whether he lived or died. He was only worried about the show. That truth hit Elvis harder than the chest pain. His breathing steadied just enough for him to whisper, "No, not like this." No one spoke. For the first time in his career, Elvis Presley, the king, the golden boy, the unstoppable performer, was unable to stand, unable to sing, unable to obey. He was just a man collapsing beneath a life too heavy for any human to bear. The colonel cornered him the moment the paramedics left. The door had barely clicked shut behind the medics when Parker stepped forward, blocking the only exit like a wall. The dressing room, once crowded with voices and movement, felt suddenly too small. Just Elvis, the colonel, and the suffocating weight of everything that had just happened. "You ruined the night," the colonel spat, his voice low and sharp like a knife. "Do you realize the money we just lost?" His words hung in the air, vibrating with anger. He didn't ask if Elvis was okay. He didn't ask what the medics had said. He didn't even ask if Elvis could breathe properly. Elvis leaned against the wall, his legs still unsteady, his chest tight. His breathing was better, but far from normal. Sweat clung to his skin. His head pounded. His body felt like a battlefield where every muscle had fought too hard just to keep him upright. But something inside him had shifted. "I don't care about the money," Elvis said. The sentence came out quietly, but it was the kind of quiet that shook the ground. The colonel's eyes flared. "You will when you see the contract penalties." Elvis's heart sank, not because he didn't believe him, but because he did. He knew the colonel had always controlled him, but tonight he was seeing the monster without the mask. The mask of the loving manager, the genius mastermind, the man who built Elvis Presley. Tonight, all he saw was a man cornered by his own greed. Parker walked over to a metal briefcase he'd brought into the room earlier. With an angry, exaggerated motion, he snapped it open and pulled out a thick stack of papers. Contracts, agreements, debt summaries, casino obligations. All the invisible chains that had been wrapped around Elvis for years. He slammed the stack of papers onto the table so hard a glass of water tipped, spilling across the surface. "You're in debt to me," he snarled, stabbing a finger at the contracts. "In debt to the casinos. In debt to your own damn name." Elvis's breath stopped. The words sank into him slowly, like poison. He had always suspected. He had always felt it. But hearing it said so plainly, so coldly, made the room spin. This wasn't management. This was entrapment. "You planned this," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You kept me working so I could never walk away." There was the truth he'd tried not to face, the truth he'd buried under pills, applause, and denial. The colonel didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. He just stared at Elvis with a blank, unreadable expression, as if Elvis had simply pointed out the obvious. Elvis felt something shift inside him, something powerful, something dangerously close to courage. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was quiet and raw, the kind of courage that comes when a man has simply run out of fear. "You don't own me," he said, voice firm. The colonel's lips curled into a cruel, almost smile. "I own everything you are." The words hit like a slap. Memories rushed into Elvis's mind, early days on the road, trusting smiles, promises of the American dream, Colonel's reassuring voice telling him not to worry about the numbers, that he would handle everything. The movies he didn't want to make. The tours he didn't want to do. The deals he didn't agree with but signed anyway because he thought that was how loyalty worked. The silence that followed felt like a battlefield. The air in the room grew heavy. The noises from the casino outside, slots ringing, glasses clinking, distant laughter, suddenly felt grotesque. A carnival of distractions swirling just beyond the door while he suffocated inside. Elvis stepped closer to the table, staring at the contracts. Each page felt like a confession of how badly he had given himself away. How completely he had allowed another man to steer his life. His hands trembled, but his gaze was steady. "I'm done," he said quietly. The colonel frowned. "Done with what?" Elvis lifted his eyes, and for the first time in years, there was no fear in them, only exhaustion, pain, and a thin line of resolve. "I'm done letting you kill me." The words left his mouth before he could second-guess them. Parker's face hardened, eyes narrowing. "Watch yourself, boy." But Elvis didn't back down this time. He was tired of shrinking, tired of apologizing for suffering. "You push me until I can't breathe," Elvis continued, his voice trembling but growing stronger by the second. "You fill my schedule, sign my name, trade my life for your deals. You don't care if I live or die as long as the money keeps coming in." "That's the business," the colonel snapped. "That's your business," Elvis shot back. "Not mine." For a moment, the colonel looked almost stunned. Not because Elvis had accused him, but because he had spoken with a backbone he hadn't shown in years. "You think you can walk away?" Parker sneered. "You think it's that easy? These papers say otherwise. These casinos say otherwise. Your debts say otherwise. Elvis Presley doesn't get to decide when the show ends. I do." "Elvis Presley is a man," Elvis said, his voice cracking. "Not your circus animal." His chest rose and fell heavily. Emotion choked his throat. He could feel the fight draining what little strength he had left, but he couldn't stop. "Not now. All these years," he continued, "I thought I owed you my loyalty. I thought you were looking out for me. I thought this was a partnership. But it wasn't, was it? It was a cage. And I walked right into it." Parker took a step closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. "You don't have the luxury of a conscience, Elvis. Not anymore. You have obligations. You signed. And if you don't pay, everyone comes after you. The casinos. The investors. The lawyers. You will lose everything." Elvis's eyes burned, but not from fear, from anger. From grief. From the realization of just how lost he'd been. "Maybe losing everything," he whispered, "is better than losing myself." The colonel laughed once, a cold, humorless sound. "You won't last a month without me." Elvis didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at the stack of contracts again. His gaze moved over the black ink, the signatures, the traps disguised as agreements. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, feel it pounding in his neck. His fingers twitched at his sides. The room seemed to narrow until there was nothing but him, the table, and the papers that represented every wrong turn he'd taken out of trust, fear, and dependence. Elvis finally said what he had carried inside for years. "I'm done letting you kill me." He took a breath. Slow. Shaking. And with shaking hands, Elvis reached for the contract, ready to do something he had never dared before. The pen hovered above the paper, trembling between Elvis's fingers. It wasn't just ink waiting to touch a contract. It was years of fear, exhaustion, dependency, and manipulation coiled around his hand like a ghost he could no longer ignore. The colonel stood across the room, arms crossed, jaw set, watching Elvis with the cold certainty of a man who had always gotten his way. Elvis's eyes drifted down the pages. The neat paragraphs, typed lines, and threatening clauses all blurred together into a suffocating reminder of every night he had forced himself onto a stage when his body begged for rest, every time he swallowed painkillers just to keep moving, every smile he faked for cameras that didn't care whether he lived or died as long as the show went on. He felt the room tighten around him. His mind flooded with memories, Graceland's gates, where fans waited for hours hoping to glimpse him, the laughter of Lisa Marie echoing through hallways during rare moments of peace, his mother's tender voice that still haunted him like a warm ghost. These images twisted with the darker ones: lonely hotel rooms, pills scattered across nightstands, sweat-soaked backstage panic attacks. His hand dropped slightly, and the pen clicked against the table. The colonel took one slow step closer. "Go on," he hissed. "Sign it. You know you can't function without me." The words sliced through Elvis. Not because they were harsh, but because for years he had believed them. Charlie Hodge lingered in the corner, silently pleading with his eyes, begging Elvis to make the right choice, but also terrified of the explosion that would follow. Elvis inhaled sharply. His chest burned with the weight of everything left unsaid. Then, slowly, almost painfully, he lifted his gaze to meet the colonel's. "I'm not your property," he whispered. The colonel froze. It was the softest sentence Elvis had spoken that night, yet somehow the loudest. "You listen to me, boy," Parker snapped, stepping forward. "I built you. Without me, you're nothing but a washed-up singer with a house too big and bills you can't pay." Elvis's fingers tightened around the pen. He remembered the early days, the hope, the excitement, the belief that Parker saw him as an artist, not a revenue machine. He remembered the trust, so blind, so pure, he had placed in the man who now stood before him like an enemy. "No," Elvis said louder this time. "You didn't build me. I was Elvis Presley before you knew my name." Charlie's breath caught. It was the first time Elvis had said something that bold to the colonel. Parker chuckled, shaking his head. "You think you can survive without me? You think you can cancel shows? Break contracts? You owe me millions." Elvis felt his stomach twist. He knew the colonel wasn't lying, not entirely. The contracts, casinos. The tangled web Parker had spun around him for years. A cage disguised as a career. But for once, fear didn't stop him. The fear had exhausted itself. His hand trembled as he lowered the pen, not to sign, but to grip the contract. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decades press against his ribs. He tore the pages down the center. The rip echoed like a gunshot. Charlie gasped. The colonel's face drained of color. "You ungrateful bastard." Parker lunged forward, but Charlie stepped between them instantly, holding him back. Elvis stood still, chest rising and falling, tears burning at the corners of his eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. A strange, fragile relief. For the first time in years, he felt the faint trace of something he thought he had lost forever: sovereignty. Ownership of himself. "You don't own me," Elvis repeated, voice steadier now. "Not anymore." The colonel glared at him, breathing heavily, hatred swirling in his eyes. "This isn't over. You'll crawl back. You always do." Elvis turned away, his voice breaking. "If I crawl back, I'll die." The colonel paused. Just for a moment. A flicker of something moved through his expression. Annoyance? Shock? Guilt? Whatever it was, it vanished as quickly as it appeared, He stormed out, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the mirrors. The moment the echo faded, Elvis's knees nearly buckled. He braced himself against the table, breathing in ragged gasps. Charlie went to him. "Elvis, are you okay?" "I don't know," Elvis said honestly. His voice cracked. "But for the first time, I'm not lying about it." Charlie sat beside him. "You did the right thing." Elvis swallowed. His hands shook uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. "Charlie, I'm scared. I'm so damn scared." "Of what?" "Of dying," Elvis whispered. "Of dying like this. Of not seeing Lisa grow up. Of never getting better. Of being alone." Charlie put a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone. We'll get you help." Elvis nodded weakly, wiping his eyes. But deep inside, he knew the road ahead would be brutal. He knew the Colonel wouldn't simply walk away. He knew the pills still called to him in whispers. He knew his heart raced too fast, his breath caught too often. But he had taken a step. A terrifying, impossible, necessary step. And for the first time in a long while, he felt alive. A soft knock echoed through the room. Elvis froze. Then came a voice he recognized instantly, a voice that held memories of love, heartbreak, and a life that could have been different. "Can I come in?" "Priscilla." Elvis turned slowly, his breath catching in his throat at the sight of Priscilla standing in the doorway. She looked hesitant, almost fragile, her eyes searching his face with a mixture of concern, fear, and something softer, something like compassion. The room, heavy with the aftermath of the confrontation, felt strangely still. Charlie quietly slipped out, leaving them alone. Priscilla entered cautiously, her heels tapping softly on the floor. She wore a simple, elegant dress, nothing extravagant, nothing reminiscent of their glamorous past. She looked real, human, familiar in a way that made Elvis's chest ache. "I heard what happened," she said gently. "Lisa's worried, and so am I." Elvis swallowed hard. His voice was barely audible. "I'm falling apart, Scylla." Priscilla stepped closer, her expression shifting from concern to heartbreak. She had seen him broken before, during lonely nights, during emotional storms, but never like this. Never this fragile, this defeated. "Elvis," she whispered, "you don't look well." He laughed, short, bitter. "I don't feel well." His hands trembled again. He tried to hide them, but she saw. She always saw. Priscilla took a deep breath. "How long has this been happening? How long?" Elvis stared at the ground. "Years maybe. But tonight, it finally caught me." Priscilla sat beside him, her voice soft. "You don't have to pretend for me." That sentence shattered him. His tears, which he had been fighting through the arguments, the medical scare, the confrontation with the Colonel, finally fell freely. He covered his face with his hands, sobs shaking his body. "Scylla, I can't do this anymore." She placed a hand on his back, steady and warm. "You don't have to." Elvis turned toward her, tears streaking his cheeks. "I feel trapped. In my own life. In my own body. I'm scared all the time. I don't sleep. I don't breathe right. I don't even know who I am anymore." Priscilla's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I know. I've seen it happening. I just didn't know how to help." "I'm losing myself," Elvis whispered, "piece by piece." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Elvis, the world sees a legend. But I see you. The real you. The boy from Tupelo who just wanted to sing. The man who loved too deeply. The father who would do anything for Lisa. He shook his head. I'm failing her. No, Priscilla said firmly. You're struggling. That's different. And she loves you. She needs you alive. Elvis felt something crack inside him. A wall he had built long ago to survive the pressure, the expectations, the loneliness. He whispered, voice trembling. I don't want to die, Scylla. Priscilla's tears fell then. She cupped his face gently. Then you need help. Real help. Not another pill. Not another show. Not another lie to yourself. He nodded weakly, trying to steady his breath. I don't even know where to begin. Begin with honesty, she said. With yourself. With the people who care about you. Begin by admitting you can't carry this alone. Elvis leaned back, exhausted. The room seemed quieter now, warmer somehow. Like her presence softened the edges of his pain. Priscilla continued, her voice breaking slightly. You gave so much of yourself to the world. There's barely anything left for you. That has to change. Elvis looked into her eyes, the same eyes he once dreamed of spending a lifetime with. What if it's too late? It's not, she said immediately. It's not too late. Not if you fight. He exhaled shakily. I'm tired of fighting. I know. She brushed a tear from his cheek. But you're still here. That means something. Silence settled between them, heavy but healing. Elvis closed his eyes, letting her words sink into him like medicine. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a product. Or a puppet. Or a fading star grasping at relevance. He felt like a man. A broken one, but still a man. What do I do, Scylla? He asked quietly. She held his hand tighter. Let tonight be your beginning. He opened his eyes slowly. Her expression was steady, hopeful. Something shifted inside him, a faint spark he barely recognized. Not enough to fix everything. Not enough to save him from the demons inside. But enough to make him want to try. He squeezed her hand, whispering, Stay with me, just for a little while. She nodded softly. Of course. And in that quiet, dimly lit dressing room, Elvis Presley, legend, icon, allowed himself to be small, human, vulnerable. The world outside waited for a king. But tonight, he was simply a man trying to survive his own story. And for the first time in years, he believed he still had a chance.